Hello Year 4. We're going to be learning more about states of matter in today's science lesson. We're going to be learning some new vocabulary as well as recapping some vocabulary that we have seen before. And throughout the video I'm going to ask you to pause at certain times so that you can go and do some tasks just like we would do in a normal science lesson. The first word that we're going to recap is from last week, and it's the word solid. A solid is something that you can hold or that will stay on a surface. It doesn't flow and it keeps its shape. You can cut a solid and you can shape it if you apply pressure, like squashing or squeezing. But the amount of pressure that you have to apply depends on the material that the solid is made out of. The second word that we're going to recap today is the word material, and this is a word that we will have met in science in year 1 and year 2, if not even earlier, but it's often a word that can be quite tricky because we can get it confused with the word fabric, which is what our clothes are made out of. Material in science is anything solid that an object is made from. So for example, this is made of glass. We might call it a cup, but it is made of glass. The object is cup, the material is glass. The object is a bottle and the material is plastic. The third word that we're going to recap today is the word liquid. A liquid is something that pours. It's something that if you were to pour it into a container would make the shape of the container on the inside. You can't hold it. If you were to try and hold it in your hand, it would flow out of your hand. The final word that we're going to recap for today is the word gas. Now, gas is quite hard for us to imagine because most gases are invisible. A gas is something that spreads out to fill the room that you might be in or to fill the container that it is put in. A way of helping us to imagine what these states look like is by drawing them. And we use something called the particle model to help us to imagine and to draw solids, liquids and gases. This isn't often something that children learn until they're in Key Stage 3 when they're in secondary school, but it is a really good way of helping us to imagine what they look like. So this is what a solid looks like within the particle model. You can see that I've drawn it on a flat surface, which means that it's holding its shape by itself. And you can see that all of the particles, the pieces, are close together. I have drawn it so that it looks a bit like a multiplication array that we would use in maths to help us with our times tables. And I have used my mathematical knowledge to make sure that in each of my pictures that I'm going to show you, I have the same number. I've got them colour coded. So I've got 6 orange, 6 purple, 6 yellow and 6 red. And if you use your times tables knowledge, 6 times 4 is 24. This is what a liquid looks like in the particle model. You can see that I've got the same number of particles as I did for my solid, and this time I have put it inside a container or a beaker, and that way it shows that it's filling the shape of the container. You can see that there's a little bit of space in between each of the particles, which is what helps it to flow and to move. This is what a gas looks like in the particle model. You can see again that I've still got my 24 particles, and this time they have filled up the box that I have drawn them in. They have filled up the container. This could be a box or it could be a room. And you can see that there's much more space in between each of the particles. Pause the video now and have a go at drawing your own particle model. Try drawing a solid, a liquid and a gas, and remember these things when you're drawing it. A solid's particles are very close together and they hold their own shape. A liquid's particles have more space in between them and will make the shape of the container that they are in. And gases' particles have far more space in between them and will fill up a container that they are put in. Remember to draw the same number of particles for each of the states. A good way of seeing what these three states look like in real life is to think about water. Water is very special in chemistry because it can be in all three states. If you think about what water is like at room temperature, it's a liquid. If you were to take away heat and put it in the freezer, your liquid would turn into a solid. If you were to apply heat and make it hotter by putting your liquid water in a kettle or on the hob in a pan, if you were to add heat, it would start to turn into steam, which is a gas. Something very important to think about when we are thinking about steam is that what you see coming out of the spout of a kettle is not actually steam. Because if you remember what we said before, is that gases are invisible. At least most gases are invisible. So what you see coming out the spout of a kettle is actually tiny little water droplets. And we'll talk more about those later on when I teach you some new vocabulary. Pause again now, because I'd like you to go and fill up an ice cube tray or a small bowl of water and put it in your freezer. And I'd like you to go and put some water in your kettle, and with the help of an adult, I'd like you to turn on that kettle and see what you can see. After all of this is done and we have finished this video, much later you'll be able to see water in its three different states. You'll be able to see it when it's frozen as a solid, you'll be able to see it coming out of your tap as a liquid, and you'll be able to see what it looks like when you put it in a kettle and you apply heat. Teach you two new words now and the definitions that go with them. You might have heard these words before in everyday life, but it's important to remember that in a scientific context, we need to know exactly what they mean. The first word is the word evaporation. I've drawn some wiggly lines underneath to show how many syllables this word has. Evaporation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Evaporation. And you might have seen that at the end I have colour coded it, and I've done that because just before we started our home learning we were learning about the different shun sounds that we get at the end of our words, and we learned that if there is a long A sound then it's T-I-O-N that often comes in the middle or at the end of words, and we put an action to our shun. T-I-O-N, shun, 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 so that it sounds like a train. So this is the word evaporation. And evaporation we can see again when we turn on our kettle or when we put some water or some liquid in a pan on the hob. Evaporation is the process where when we apply heat to a liquid, it starts to turn into a gas. The new word that I'm going to teach you is the word condensation. This one you can see from our syllable lines. Condensation has got 4 syllables. And again, we've got our long A followed by T-I-O-N. Condensation. And this is the opposite of evaporation. So what do you think it might mean? It's not freezing. Instead, it's what happens when a gas turns back into a liquid. If we were to take heat away again, steam would turn back into a liquid. And a really good way of seeing this in action in our everyday life is if it's quite cold on the outside of a window but warm inside, we can sometimes see that a window is starting to fog up. And you might see little droplets of water coming down the inside of the window. That is condensation. That's when we've had lots of water in the air around us and as it's a gas, and then it hits something cold, we're taking away heat, and it turns back into a liquid. Pause again now, and I've got an activity for you which is best if it's not raining outside. I will put a picture up on the screen, and that involves you having some kind of camera, whether it's on a phone or on an iPad or something like that, and it would be really good if you had some chalk as well. See if you can recreate what happens in the picture by leaving water to evaporate over time. Okay, I've got a bit of a quiz for you now. It's a true or false quiz. Number 1, true or false? All solids are heavy. What do you think? This is false. If you think about something like aluminium foil, can I pour this? Could I put it in a glass and then pour it into another glass? No. Does it fill up the space that I'm in here? No. But is it heavy? No, it's not heavy at all. It's very light. So this is a solid, but it is also light. So not all solids are heavy. If you think about cotton wool, that's a solid, but it's also very light. If you think about a plastic bag, that's a solid, but it's also very light. True or false? All metals are solids at room temperature. What do you think? I'm thinking again, aluminium foil, that's a solid. I'm thinking about the things that are inside my phone, all the little computer parts. They're all solids at room temperature. I'm thinking about what our playgrounds are made out of. They're all made of wood, they're all made of metal, and they're all solid. But there is a special metal that at room temperature, so we don't have to apply heat and we don't have to take heat away, that is at room temperature a liquid, and that is called mercury. And it would be really good if you could pause this video now and go and type into YouTube to find mercury, to find a video of what it looks like at room temperature. It's absolutely fascinating, and we don't see it much in our everyday lives because it's toxic to us. If we were to get that in our bodies, it would cause us real harm. So we don't see it very often. But it's a really fascinating metal for you to go and have a look at. It's important when we're learning new words that we know what the word looks like. We can do the shape of the word, and we commit that to our memory. It's good to have a picture of what those words look like, which is why we have the particle model for solids, liquids and gases. And it's important as well, I think, for us to put actions to those different words. So I'm going to give you some actions that you could use to represent solid, liquid, gas, evaporation and condensation. Solid is something that we can hold. So shall we have a flat surface and have our solid on a flat surface? This is our action for solid. A liquid is something that can flow. So let's do this. Something that can flow. A gas is something that fills up an area that we are in. So let's do this for gas. It's filling up our area. Evaporation and condensation, because they are the opposite of each other, it might be good for us to have actions which are the opposite of each other, where we're doing something that is the opposite. Now, we can also listen to the way that these words sound to help us and give us a clue. I think that when something is evaporating, it's often going up into the air, isn't it? So we can go evaporation. And the E sound, our voice is going up, isn't it? Evaporation. So we can do this. Maybe going up. Evaporation. And condensation, if we listen, condensation, our voice is going down. Condensation. So that can help us along with the image that we might have in our head of water droplets going down a window to help us for condensation. So evaporation, condensation.